Okay, how about that jazz? So we're making some shifting around here, as you can see. Some of the undoing of the band is going to continue to happen while we get started here, but we want to get going on our conversation for this portion of the evening. We're going to begin this conversation by listening to the members of our panel, and we're going to be walking this microphone back and forth just up here. Hank, should I stay on the stage for?
That'd be great.
Is that better? That was his very low-key way of saying get on the stage. So we're going to listen to the panel conversation, and then you're going to have an opportunity to talk amongst yourselves for a few minutes after the panel has concluded. And then if you have questions for the panel during that time of conversation in sort of some small groups, you can write some questions down. You'll have an opportunity to do that to be read to the panel a little later. So our panel tonight will be moderated by Bogue Wallen. Bogue and his wife Bonnie are worship here at Fourth, and Bogue is currently serving as the chairman of the Greenville Housing Fund. And I believe we had Brian Brown. Is he here?
Brian's here.
Brian Brown, yeah, okay, the executive director of Greenville Housing Fund is here with us tonight. Also, Reverend Stacy Mills. Stacy is the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Regional Engagement at USC Upstate. He's the chairman of the board of the Urban League of the Upstate and is senior minister at Mountain View Baptist Church here in Greenville. We have Dot Russell, who is chairwoman of the Sterling Neighborhood Association and on the board of the Sterling Land Trust. And Greg Gerald, who you have met, co-founder and, as he says, chief door answerer for QC Family Tree. Greg, amazing artistic expression of your story tonight, and we appreciate you bringing that to us. And we have Brandon Cook, who is the director of Healthcare for the Homeless, the Healthcare for the Homeless program with New Horizons Family Health. He is also treasurer of the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council Board of Directors, and serves with a variety of other healthcare and homelessness organizations in the upstate and statewide. And Susan McClary, who is the coordinator for the Greenville Homeless Alliance, vice chair for the Greenville Housing Authority Board, and has previously served on the City of Greenville Affordable Housing Steering Committee, among a variety of other roles that she has played in the housing and conversation in Greenville. So it is good to have you all with us. We're going to pass this microphone down as you speak, so you'll know whether it's working or not, is whether you have it close enough or too close or far away, enough away. So Bogue, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone. That was a really wonderful concert. Let me echo the sentiments that I know everyone in the audience had about your performance. I'm delighted to be here. Let me just make a quick disclaimer. I'm the chairman of the Greenville Housing Fund. That just means I really don't know what I'm talking about. Brian Brown, who is the CEO of the Greenville Housing Fund, really knows what he's talking about. And the people on the stage know a lot more about it. So I'm going to try and act as the rookie here to elicit as much information as we can about the subject tonight and see if we can't kick off a conversation that you can continue with. So in the next 35 minutes or so, we'll see what we can do. Let me just start off very briefly, and then I'll kick it to Susan. I think it's important to, in a number of these forums, talk a little bit about what we mean by affordable housing. And I'll stick to the numbers. There was a handout in your chair that I think Susan provided, but at the very, very top level, the best way to think about affordable housing is that it has to do with income and how much you can afford of your income to pay for housing. And in the HUD guidelines, and really those have been proven over a long period of time, 30% of your income could be used for housing. So when you are paying more than 30% of your income, you are house burdened. There's too much of your income going towards housing, and therefore you're shorting some other part of your life in your requirements to live and paying too much for housing. So just to put that into perspective for a moment, if you made $12 an hour, you'd earn roughly $24,000 a year. 30% of your income would mean you've got to find housing at $600 a month. if you were making $15 an hour, $30,000 a year, that'd be $750 a month. So you can already see how challenging that is. So what kind of people make that kind of money? A starting salary for a fireman in the city of Greenville is $33,000 a year. If you're in retail sales, you might be making $11.25 an hour. If you're a cook at a regular restaurant, maybe you're making $11 to $15 an hour. Starting salary for a teacher was $35,000 a year.
40
Now moved up to 40, thank you. So what's transpired here is that the cost of housing has outpaced the cost of living. Just a thought, Greenville Housing Fund is actually going through a re-upping of the study that was done 2 years ago and trying to validate exactly where we stand. And some of the newest data out is that the cost of housing over the last 10 years, rental housing that is, has gone up 50%. So it's 50% more expensive to rent housing now than it was in 2009 or 2010. And the salaries haven't gone up 50% by a long shot. In the last 10 years, the amount of housing that's available has diminished. So if you were to just look at how much sales activity and what's available in the market, that number's actually gone down. So that sort of gives you a perspective and a very high level of what's going on in our housing market. So let me just kick off to you, Susan. Maybe you can relate to what's going on in the homeless aspects of that. Give us your data.
Thank you, Bogue. Yes, please take the sheet with you tonight and use it often and try to talk with your friends and neighbors about sort of where our big deficits are, and then hopefully you can sort of see as well where you fall into this range of housing. But the big news is on the left side of your sheet, you'll see that we have this majority of our deficit falls into that very first category. And that's where the Greenville Homeless Alliance focuses, and we're really focusing at about 15,000 annual income and below, which is significantly lower than how high that first group goes. But our affordability extends on up. And so what we also want people to understand is most of what has been built is in that far right. And so that's where we've seen the new construction, and that widening of those who need affordable housing continues to grow. And just to give you a reference, like when you hear affordable often now in the newspaper, because it is there a lot, we're really talking about that center that's the 57,000 to 100,000. So think about that when you hear the term affordable, that's the household income we're referring to. And just in a nutshell, as Bogue mentioned, we recently had too many units in Greenville, and I think it's recent. It was around 2006. We actually had about 800 too many units that were affordable to that very lowest income, about 20,000 annual income and below. And now we've swung to this deficit of 12,000 units.
That just reiterates the deficit's getting worse.
And the deficit's getting worse.
Yeah. Great. Stacy, maybe you can give us an idea of what Mountain View Baptist Church is doing with affordable housing and its role in affordable housing?
Sure. First, I want to say Mike told me to wear a tux, and then he's in jeans. I'm kidding. He did not tell me. No.
Well, you look good.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Even with my bum foot bleed. Tonight's the Urban League's gala, and it's a sneakers and black tie gala, so I want to put that disclaimer out there. So I have on one sneaker on the foot that I could wear a shoe on, and the other one I have a fractured toe, so I'm kind of a clown suit today. Yeah, tonight's incredible. I want to say that having this kind of courageous conversation really encourages me as a leader in our community, and as a pastor in a church that's on the opposite side of town from this church, directly on the other side of the tracks, literally. And Mountain View just has the good fortune to have purchased a significant amount of properties in our community. And we began making those purchases about 22 years ago with the intent of building a more modern facility. Mind you, we have not outgrown our current facility. It was built by the community, the neighbors, the people who lived in that immediate neighborhood. And at one time, 400 to 500 families lived in that immediate neighborhood. Just to give you some idea of where Mountain View is, if you're traveling out West Washington Street, past the main post office and end up at the Norfolk Southern Railroad Depot, that takes a dog leg left to some of the golfers in the room. It's a sharp left. And then under the train trestle, and as soon as you come from under the train trestle, that's our community on the left. It's known as Newtown, part of Southern Side. So how did 400 to 500 families live there? It was very densely populated, shanty-style duplexes, quadruplexes, triplexes, and those families built Mountain View. And over time, they moved away for better. But now the church has an opportunity to build a community that built it as a worship facility. So what does that mean? That means we need to be responsible with what we put back into the community. I learned this fancy term from Vogue at breakfast a few weeks ago called decimated housing, and that's where you have some market rate, some affordable housing in the same neighborhood. Much like the harmony we heard on the stage tonight, that somehow we